Hey, welcome in everyone to another edition of College Football Coast to Coast here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. But this is only possible because of Pigskin Pete. How you doing today?
What's up, Mark? How you doing, buddy? What's up,
Doing
everybody
well.
out there in the chat land? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to everyone. Absolutely. So this is the first edition for 2021. We'll see what this fine year holds for us.
Hopefully it's better than 2020 was.
Oh, man.
For everybody.
Yeah, unless the world has another pandemic for us or who knows what else. But we will stick to college football and everything that's going on both on and off the field. And, of course, typically, whether it be that Sunday right after the regular season, which was smashed up against the bowl season this year, or it's when these teams get eliminated and lose that bowl game or play that bowl game that we get some coaching decisions. So out of Texas, the big one after Tom Herman won an Alamo Bowl to finish a distinguished 4-0 at Texas, but accomplished little else. He gets axed just a couple of weeks after the athletic director there at Texas gave him somewhat of a vote of confidence, or what appeared to be so. And Steve Sarkeesian is the new head coach at Texas. How does that strike you?
I think it's a good hire. I think between him and Fickle and obviously Urban Meyer still out there, every time a coaching situation comes up, I think it's a good hire. Obviously, he's an offensive guy, offensive genius, some people say. Had some personal problems, let's say, when he was at Southern Cal, and that was the reason that he got canned there. Got a second chance at Nick Saban halfway house, which Nick Saban seems to give all the former coaches a chance. But I think it's a good hire. Whether you like Texas or not, or whether they've been good or not, they have not met expectations for Texas in a long time now. But it's still one of the top 5 or 6 jobs in the country, I would imagine. And they have enough money there to do whatever they want, pay whoever they want, whatever they want. And then if they want to fire you, they have the money to pay out the buyout. So I think it's a good hire.
Pete, I don't know if you coined that phrase, but if you did, you got to run with it.
What's that?
The Saban halfway house.
Oh, yeah. It's like the Heisman Trophy house, the Saban halfway house.
That's what it's been. I am scratching my head a little bit over this one. I'm not going to blast it as being an awful hire by any stretch. I just don't know. I just don't get it. Because like you, I look at Texas as a top 5 to 10 destination in the country, despite the lack of success over the last 10 years. Still with the money, the prestige, the tradition, the resources to get it done, and certainly the recruiting footprint in Texas. Steve Sarkeesian, I'm going to focus on the on-the-field performance at Washington and USC. So he's had 2 big jobs. Yeah. 2 big jobs. USC, another 5 to 10 top program, and Washington more maybe in the 15 to 20 range, but still 2 big jobs, and he's performed a marginal, mediocre performance. And the coaches that preceded him and succeeded him there both performed better. So Chris Peterson takes over Washington, raises it to another level, gets them in the playoff. They're the best team in the Pac-12 for his 3 to 4 year run there. Even Clay Helton, for all the hell that he receives in criticism and ridicule, he accomplished more at USC than Steve Sarkeesian. So he did okay. I don't want to say his tenures there were disasters, but he did little there. Okay, so he's off the map in terms of a head coaching job for 5 years. He goes to Alabama. He does some great things like other people have at Alabama. And I guess just having that magic fairy dust sprinkled on him in Tuscaloosa by Nick Saban must be the magic cure. And I say that not completely sarcastic, because it's happened with other coaches where if Nick Saban's going to take you in and give you an offensive coordinator's position, you must know what you're doing. And then he must interview well, because the track record says he doesn't get the Texas job. But and then you also have to look at the job that he's done with Alabama with a certain slant, because of the obvious talent advantage that they have when they hit the field, and he's scheming up all these great offensive strategies. So It just wasn't a home run hire like, okay, they got Urban Meyer or fill in the blank. There's only a few guys that you would say they got that guy.
There's your problem.
I understand why they let go Tom Herman. I just think he's a question mark.
Yeah. Well, certainly he's a question mark. I think it's also fair to say that due to his personal problems, both at Washington and at USC, that maybe he's a better coach now than he was then. Potentially could be. Also, it's the like you said. I mean, once you commit to you're going to get rid of Herman, then when you have to go to well, who you're going to get that's better? Well, everyone's going to be a gamble outside of one or two guys in the country. Myers already said no to it, so I think that next tier of guys, Luke Fickell. I think Sarkeesian's right in there as far as a quality candidate. So who knows what's going to happen? Everyone thought Tom Herman was going to be a great hire, right? So everyone thought Charlie Strong was going to be a great hire, and those two things didn't work out. We'll see what happens with him, but I'd rather have him if I'm a Texas fan than the majority of the other coaching candidates. I'd rather have him than the guy that went to Auburn. So I think they made a better hire than Auburn did.
I am not going to make a declarative statement on that, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
I think Brian Hart.
Nobody knows. We'll all find out together.
Yeah.
But
I just think that there are other guys beyond the obvious, Saban, Dabo, Meyer. That's kind of its own tier. And then there's not a lot of, but there's a tier almost like the programs of a James Franklin, a Matt Campbell, those guys that they could have gone after that I would say, okay, well, they had a successful run at a big program. I get it. Steve Sarkeesian, I don't see that out of. Not that he's not capable of it. And to your point, even going back to Bill Belichick, we've seen coaches that have said in their second and third jobs, hey, I learned a lot. So they obviously knew football. Bill Belichick knew football when he was the Giants defensive coordinator winning Super Bowls. But then he said later, hey, when I was with the Browns and had my first head coaching job, I didn't know a lot of stuff, and I learned a lot, and I made a lot of mistakes. Pete Carroll had 2 marginal runs in the NFL before he got it right at USC. There have been a number of guys that have said, hey, I learned a lot from my first big job. Lane Kiffin maybe has learned some things along the way. You talk about a guy that was handed jobs in like barely at 30 years old, NFL jobs in Tennessee. Lane Kiffin, my goodness, but I think he's learned something along the way.
Yeah, somebody in the comment section just said, let me see if I can find this comment here. It was a good comment, or at least something that I've heard before. Sean Stapleton says, Texas went after Sarkeesian to land a 5-star quarterback. Well, I think they sent him there not only for the 5-star quarterback, but to get the offense that can keep up with, the big boy of the Big 12, and that is Oklahoma. Tom Herman was an offensive guy, but they never got going offensively near enough to compete with Oklahoma the entire time he was there. So they clearly want, like a lot of other schools want to do right now, Mark. A lot of these schools are going offensive, head coaches for a reason, and because the game is trending that way, has been for a while. So, but that's a good point I think he made. I think that he's a good offensive mind, and that had a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, so we've got Tom Herman out at Texas. He always appeared as though he knew what he was doing. Like when I heard him talking, like he sounded good. He looked like he was confident, knew what he was doing, accomplished a lot at Ohio State as an offensive coordinator, but just didn't get the job done at Texas. And again, they didn't fall apart. They weren't horrible. They were much better than they were under Charlie Strong, but you can't win 60% of your games at Texas and not win the Big 12 and be there for 4 years. I thought he was going to get 2021 since this year wasn't awful. They're going to finish in the top 20. They went 7-3. They won a bowl game. I thought he was going to get one more shot, but we had some Texas guys on here. One who graduated from the school has been covering the team for 5 or 6 years. And he said that he was just basically running through tweets from current and former players, recent former players. And usually when a coach loses his job, like Gus Malzahn loses his job, there's a ton of Auburn players saying, we wish the coach the best, man. We hate to lose him. This sucks. All those. Mm-hmm. There was none of that out there. There was a lot of cheering. So maybe that had something to do with it, that he did not have that locker room.
He did not seem to be very popular by the players and by anybody in that state that was a Longhorns fan. I think they were just they were done with him.
So it's an intriguing situation in Texas. They should win. They haven't for a decade, and now they've got another coach in Steve Sarkeesian trying to do what Charlie Strong and Tom Herman could not, and that's compete with Oklahoma on a yearly basis. Don't know that we've got a whole lot to talk about here. Maybe somebody in the chat has a comment on Pete had mentioned to me before we jumped on. Doc Holliday, head coach at Marshall for 11 years, axed kind of unexpectedly. They won their first 7 games, were in that group of being talked about as just a Cinderella team, but they crashed at the end of the year with 3 losses. But I don't think any of them in an embarrassing fashion, although they did lose to Rice as a 3-touchdown favorite. But the last couple of games in the bowl game were respectable efforts, but he gets fired after 11 years there. So I don't know if you've got anything on that. I got to tell you, I haven't looked into it, so not a whole lot out of me.
No, I just think it was funny, or not funny, but interesting that they fired him and he won Coach of the Year in the conference. So it's like, whatever. I mean, what are the expectations at Marshall? Let's be real. Yeah, you ended the season badly. This is another situation of who you're going to get that's better than the guy that's been there. But maybe they had an expectation before him preseason and said, look, you need to win 10 games this year or whatever, 9 games this year, or you're out. And he didn't meet the expectation. Who knows what really happened there.
So we'll dive right into it. Of course, we've got a huge matchup coming up for the national championship 1 week from today. So we will have another show to go that we can really break down Alabama, Ohio State. So we'll look in the rearview mirror at the 2 semifinal games and other bowl games and invite you to leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics for us in the live chat. I will be scanning the live chat. And keep in mind that the super chat is available to you. It's your individual contributions that keep us going. And we would love to get a sponsor here to also help the cause. So if you've got any contacts to sponsors, please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail for a sponsor for a show that I love to do each and every week with Pigskin Pete here, college football coast to coast. And, I think from time to time, Pigskin, when I throw that out there about a sponsor, that I'm just spitting into the wind and nothing's going to happen. But some dude calls me at 2:00 in the morning after a live stream the other night, and he had some sponsorship ideas. So you never know.
There you go.
And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, these Nebraska folks got together and contributed for a Nebraska live show for about 10 weeks. All right. So this past, of course, we had the semifinals. So we want to make sure that we get the full discussion in on those. But let's hit Vinay's comment here about the ACC. So he comments here, how do you explain the ACC going 0-6 in bowl games? Is it a talent gap, coaching gap, program gap, or all of the above? Or I will add to that, Vinay, is it just coincidence, circumstance, opt-outs, other things can be involved in that as well. So being the ACC guy, Pigskin, I'll serve this one up for you first.
Probably a combination of all those things. It was hard to evaluate. Like we talked about this all year when we talked about rankings, Mark. It's extremely difficult to rank teams versus other teams in other conferences when they're not having interconference play. There's zero to judge off of other than the eye test alone. I think some of the look, it was a crazy year. I think that I think North Carolina definitely would have had a better chance of winning that game had they not had 3 of their best players out. That's for sure. Some of these other games, I don't know. I mean, look, Clemson was going to lose that game after what I saw on that field that night. There was no way Clemson had a shot in that game with Ohio State playing the way that they played. So outside of that, I mean, Wake Forest, there were several ACC games canceled, right? Boston College opted out, Syracuse opted out, Pitt opted out. Am I missing anybody? Virginia opted out. So there was 4 other ACC teams at least. Georgia Tech, I think, right? That's another one. So 5. There's 5 teams that didn't play that were eligible to play. So who knows? But it was a pretty pitiful performance overall by the conference in the bowl season, no doubt about it.
Like you, I've got to take them one by one, and the one that deserves the most of an asterisk next to it is the one you just mentioned, the Orange Bowl. If anything, I'm going to credit North Carolina for playing Texas A&M that close. That game was a touchdown game. It was a close game to the final minute. Texas A&M tacked on a touchdown to give them a 2-score victory. But if anything, North Carolina, they're missing 2 of the best running backs in the country their best wide receiver, their best defensive player, and they're hanging with Texas A&M, who's supposed to be a top 5 team. I thought it was actually a good effort by North Carolina. So that's where you got to take the games into context. So it's a loss for the ACC, but they're hanging with the top 5 team without their best players. So I credit North Carolina. The Clemson situation is basically, and we'll dive more into this game after we get past the ACC conversation, is that nothing's going to change my mind that those were the 3 best teams in the country playing last Friday. It just so happens that Ohio State either just played lights out on one given night, or they're a little bit better, or significantly, decidedly, I'll use that term, decidedly better than Clemson this year. Maybe it's something like that, and we'll find out more about Ohio State and Alabama, of course, in a week. But Clemson was playing maybe the best team in the country, or the second best team in the country. These other games, NC State, that's a disappointment when you're 8-3, and so you're playing 8-3 football against your conference. And we did note that they lucked out by missing Clemson and Miami, or Notre Dame on the schedule. So it was a light 8-3. I think we would all agree. But they still go play a 4-6 team in the SEC and lose. That's not a good look. There was another one like that, where a team with a better record had a loss against the SEC, I thought. Miami loses to Oklahoma State. That game goes to the wire. It's a competitive game. It was a 1.5-point spread. I didn't take anything from that I actually took from it that Miami didn't get embarrassed on national TV, but they at least hung in there and looked like they were going to get taken to the cleaners 21-0 in the first quarter, and they at least hung in there. So I thought Oklahoma State was going to win. They did, but Miami was right there. Other games, man, I'm not remembering who else played out of the ACC. Virginia Tech, they didn't play.
Half the conference didn't play.
Yeah, so you only had 6 games.
Yeah.
So, the NC State game was not a good look, and there was another one in there that was a bad loss. Yeah, Wake Forest, they were a touchdown underdog against Wisconsin. I think most people would consider, despite losing some close games, that Wisconsin's a pretty good football team. So, I don't think that's necessarily a bad look for the ACC there for me. Much was made, and Vinay brings it up here, about Trevor Lawrence's performance on Friday night versus Justin Fields. Certainly told me a lot more about Fields than it did Trevor Lawrence. I've got no different opinion on Trevor Lawrence being the best quarterback in the country than I did before that game.
Yeah, and the NFL is going to agree with you, Mark. Unless Urban Meyer goes to Jacksonville, which is the rumor. Well, we'll see what happens there. Look, Trevor Lawrence, this game was won in the trenches. Yeah. Ohio State absolutely dominated the offense and defensive side of the line. And so, they were all over Trevor. Trevor he never had a chance in that game. Hell, he stood through over 300 yards. I don't know what his exact stats were.
He had 4.
So he didn't play terrible. He really wasn't getting much help around him. is the main thing. And he was running for his life out there. So, look, the guy is 34 and 35-2 as a starter in 3 years, has a national championship, 3 trips to the playoffs. No, that game should change nobody's opinion of Trevor Lawrence, unless you just don't pay attention to football.
Yeah, so let's dive right into it. We'll give a little time, I guess, to Alabama, Notre Dame, but I don't know that a whole lot happened there that surprised either one of us. Alabama dominated in every possible way, from a speed perspective, strength perspective, skill position, in the trenches. Overall, Notre Dame did a decent job, in a sense, just to hang in there and keep the score respectable.
Yeah, interestingly enough, and I don't really use the transient property situation here, but I'm not a big fan of doing that. But Clemson's rematch against Notre Dame in the ACC championship, Clemson won by a larger margin than Alabama did over Notre Dame. Again, I don't really think that means much in the grand scheme of things. It's a different game, different situation, whole 9 yards. But did anybody really even believe that Notre Dame had a legitimate chance to win that game? I know it's college football and anything can happen on any given week. But I don't think that there was really anybody outside of South Bend or the Subway graduates, as they call them, or Subway fans, that really thought that Notre Dame had a chance in that game, which is why this game is going to be so much fun to watch between Alabama and Ohio State, these two offenses. Have you seen the over-under on this, Mark? It's like 77. That's like a Big 12 over and under thing there.
Yeah, I just think that leading up to the game, I heard 3 or 4 analysts break it down, and the best that they could come up with for Notre Dame was that their tight ends would have a matchup against Alabama's safeties and linebackers to exploit. And when you're just saying about all the only thing we can find is they got good tight ends, they can make some plays, and they did. That's not going to be enough. And Notre Dame had one meaningful touchdown when it was still a game, and they had to play a perfect drive. They had to execute a perfect drive. Like they were making first downs by this much, like 5 times, and they grinded it out. And based on how they were approaching the game, it was a good thing at the time because they kept the ball away from Alabama for like 8 minutes. But I thought, man, they have to do this. This is hard to score. Like they have to do everything perfectly to get a touchdown on the board. And it pretty much played out the way we all expected. Alabama was just far superior.
Well, the only chance they had was to keep the Alabama offense on the sideline, wear the clock down, run the ball. I mean, that's really the only chance they had. But the problem was they were able to do that some at certain points in the game, especially in the second half. But for the majority of the first half and at least half of the second half, they couldn't stop Alabama from scoring. So it's great. It's great to wear the clock down and keep the offense off the field and everything. But whenever you're on defense, you got to make some stops, and they weren't able to do that.
So to the nightcap in the game that everyone anticipated as a great game, or a lot of people did, Ohio State runs away from Clemson. Clemson scores early, easily on the first drive. Ohio State comes back. I think Clemson was up 14-7 was their last lead, and then Ohio State scores 28 straight to go up 35-14 at half. So Justin Fields is obviously the story of the game. I doubt if either one of us is surprised in regards to he's as talented as anybody, and we talked about that, but just Trevor Lawrence gave me what I thought, and his issues had to do with what was going on around him, not him. Justin Fields answered the call. There was a lot of ridicule, criticism, question marks about the Indiana game, the Northwestern game, and he answered the questions. He had a clutch game.
Well, there is no doubt that he played the best game of his night of the season, and maybe the best game of his career, if you really think about it. I mean, 6 touchdown passes. I think he only had 6 incompletions in the entire game too. So if he replicates that performance that he had on Friday night against Alabama, then Ohio State will win the game. It's extremely hard to replicate that type of performance 2 times in a row for any team to do that. But they were clearly more prepared. And I've always said this, going back to Clemson's rematches with Alabama in the playoffs several times. Of course, no one has ever beat the other one consecutively. So in 15, Alabama won, 16, Clemson won, 17, Alabama won, 18, Clemson won. And the reason is because I think there is something to be said for retribution. Clemson, of course, they wanted to be there. It's a playoff game, for Christ's sake. But clearly, Ohio State wanted to be there more and wanted to win more. And they were coached better, and they were more prepared leading into the game. There's not a huge talent gap between Ohio State and Clemson. But the coaching won, and they got outplayed. That's pretty much all there is to it. They played the best game, maybe of any team this season.
Yeah, the motivation factor was never in question. It was more for me. It was kind of like the psyche, because when you are 0-4 against an opponent, and I know that they can't, those individual players can't carry 0-4. They weren't around for those. They were around for one, but they hear it all week. And just what happened last year, whether they felt as though they got outplayed or felt as though they got ripped off, whatever the motivation, it was a down to the wire game where a mistake decided the game at the end, and they had to live with that for a year. And so you can either be galvanized by that and laser focused, or you can maybe psych yourself out a little bit too much and try to do too much. And I thought Ohio State needs to start fast. So after they gave up a quick touchdown, I thought, that might, after planning and lifting weights, and they showed us during the game broadcast how much this was on the minds of the Ohio State football team. Justin Fields working out with 29-23 over his shoulder constantly, and the entire team. All of that. When you do that, and then you get hit with a quick touchdown, then it tests your psyche. It tests your fortitude. And they bounced back. They played a great game. They ran the ball. So you being a Clemson guy, does this give you any cause for concern? A number of people called me and they were talking about, this is the beginning of the end for Clemson, and then, all this other ridiculous talk. And I said, you know what? I remember when Ohio State beat Alabama in the first playoff, and Saban had lost the kick 6 to Auburn the year before, so he didn't get to the championship game. And it was a whopping 2 straight years he didn't get to the national championship game, even though he was that close both times. And I was hearing all this, Saban's done, the game's passed him by. And it's like, it's ridiculous. These guys are elite, and they miss out by that much, and you're writing them off. And I think the same thing with Clemson. Sure, you need to review your approach, review your roster. That's why they're as good as they are, because they're that focused to say, hey, what went wrong and what do we need to do to fix some things? But there's nothing wrong at Clemson, in my estimation.
I mean, their program's a machine. One of the top 3 programs in the country, period. Yeah. They have the same coaches that they had when they went to the playoffs 6 years in a row. They have a 6-4 record in the playoffs, 2 national championship wins. They're recruiting at a higher clip now than they were when they won the first national championship. No, people that say that sort of thing, Mark, they're dealing... they're reacting completely off of emotion. When Clemson beat Ohio State 31-0 in a semifinal playoff matchup, did that mean that Ohio State's program was over? When Clemson beat Alabama in the national championship game 44-16, did that mean that Alabama's program was over? Both those teams happened to be playing for the national championship this week, Mark. I didn't know if you knew that. So no, not worried at all. Now, I would say for Dabo Swinney's sake, he needs to do a better job of getting his players prepared for these games. Clemson does, and this has been a Dabo Swinney thing since he's been at Clemson. He does operate better and get the team better prepared to play when they are the underdog. Every game that Clemson has won in the playoffs or national championship games during the playoff era, they have been an underdog. Okay, the ones that they've lost, well, they were favored, obviously 7 points in this Ohio State game. That might be the only one they've ever been favored in, actually. I'm trying to think. I think that might be the only one they've ever been favored in. But they do certainly play better as an underdog, and there's something to be said for that. So if Clemson is going to not be little old Clemson anymore, which nobody really considers them to be that anymore, then you're going to have to find another way to motivate the guys and prepare them for these big games against elite talent like Ohio State.
Yeah, these 3 programs are at a place where even in I don't even want to call it a down year, but they're still going to be in the top 5. So I'm asking, to put that into context, Clemson's always going to be aiming for a championship. Is next year supposed to be a year in which they're really loaded, ready to make a run, or where they're still going to make a run, but there are some things to be answered?
I think the expectation at Clemson right now, well, at least from my perspective, is to win the ACC, make it to the playoffs, and have a chance to compete for a national title. For anybody who has the expectation of it's national championship win or bust, I don't think that. I never think that way. It's extremely hard to win a national championship. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of teams doing it. Okay, so I don't ever set that as the expectation. But I'd say their expectation for next year is going to be the same as it was for this year, and the same it was for last year. And that is to put yourself in a position to make the playoffs and have a chance to win the whole thing if you can put 2 games together back-to-back in the playoffs. But I don't really have any real worries. I think coming into this season, I never thought that Clemson had a chance to win the national championship coming into the season because of the youth and inexperience and throughout the defense. The majority of the starters on defense are freshmen and sophomores, mostly freshmen. And so, but very talented, a bunch of 5-star guys all over the field, just very, very young. The defense next year, I think, is going to be miles better than it was this year. Offensively, I think they'll be just as good. The difference is, we have a young guy coming in at quarterback and DJ. We have a young guy coming in at running back, Will Shipley, 5-star running back. Obviously, losing Etienne and Trevor Lawrence it's not easy to replace those guys when they've been there for Etienne there for 4 years, and Trevor for 3. But it always balances back and forth with Clemson the way the recruiting cycles go. They usually have a dominant defense one year and a pretty good offense, or they have a dominant offense one year and a pretty good defense. And it's been maybe only one time in 2018 where they put both of those things together and were elite. They were top 3 ranked in the country in both categories, offensively and defensively. But I think next year they'll be more of a defensive team.
Nice showing today. We got about 370 on the line. Appreciate everybody stopping by for some college football talk today. Definition 409. We appreciate that super chat coming in. Clemson is a, quote, good team in a bad conference, 0-5. Depending on your definition of good team, I would give them a little bit higher rank than that. But great team, I kind of reserve that for greatness. So I get it. Twitter was flooded the next 2 days with people's playoff fix. What do we do to fix this threesome that dominates the sport? And of course, everybody's throwing around playoff proposals all the time, including myself. But it seems like people have thrown around the playoff formulas or their proposals based on other things in the past, but it seemed to be this hyper focus on, we got to do something about these 3 teams. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to either make it a 16 or an 8, or we're going to do something. And I think the common thread that I heard out there, Pete, was that people are thinking, well, if we put more teams in the playoffs, then it's going to be attractive to recruits to say, I can go to Penn State and get in the playoffs, or I can go to Florida and go to the playoffs. I don't have to go to one of those 3 schools.
I don't know if I necessarily buy into that. You know where I stand on this. I don't think you're going to get a different result 95% of the time from year to year. I think you're going to get the same. Look, I think no matter if you had 8 teams this year, you'd still have Ohio State and Alabama playing in the national championship game this year. So, is it more attractive to recruits? Maybe. I still feel that the number one thing for recruits, for the majority of the recruits anyways, the highly rated ones, 4-star guys, 5-star guys, which is what everybody's after mainly, they want to be developed for the NFL. So where can I go to get the best development for the NFL and have a best chance of being drafted decently high in the draft? And, if Penn State's in the playoffs because there's 8 teams instead of 4, that doesn't mean that Penn State is all of a sudden going to start developing their players better than they were before. I'm not picking on Penn State, XYZ team. So I don't think it makes a difference.
Somebody notating in here about Clemson as a program, because we've seen this where obviously Clemson has been the elite program just under Dabo Swinney, where Ohio State has passed it on through generations. And again, if you don't know enough about Clemson football to know that it's been a top 10 to 15 program for generations, then look into that. So this is something new in regards to elite and staying at that elite level for now 5, 6, 7 years. But it's been a top-notch program for a long time. But in regards to this level, it's going to be interesting, Pete, to see how much of this is tied to Dabo and how much of it is what he has built that can be sustained. Granted, they need to hire the next guy that's going to be the right guy, not that he's walking out the door tomorrow.
Right. I don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah, you got to hire the right guy. I just see a bunch of comments about, this is tied to Dabo, and as soon as he leaves, Clemson's done. Well, you got to hire the next right guy.
Right. Well, how many people said that about when Urban Meyer left Ohio State, that they were done? It's about the health of the program overall. Is it easy to replace Urban Meyer? Of course it isn't. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time. Is it going to be easy to replace Dabo whenever he leaves? We don't even know. Who knows when he'll leave? It could be next year, or he could be there for another 20 years for all we know. So we just don't know. So I don't even waste my time really thinking about hypotheticals about when a coach is leaving when there's no indication whatsoever that he is.
So we're in year 7 of the playoffs, and we've got these 3 schools. It will be interesting if we're still sitting here 5 years from now and we're in the same spot.
Yeah, it's very possible. And it's up to some of these teams that are on the outside looking in, like Georgia. I mean, Oklahoma, I think, is on that level. They just haven't got over the hump, as far as in the playoffs is concerned. So there's 3 or 4 or 5 teams. Oregon's another one, I think, that could possibly make a jump there. So there's teams that have the ability to make it not just the Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson show. They just have to, they got to catch up with the Joneses, as they say.
Pete, after what we saw from the other elite bowl games from the New Year's Six, you mentioned Georgia, and in particular, what did you think of Georgia's win, scraping by? You might want to say, I'll leave the term luck out of it. Very fortunate to get by Cincinnati. And that one in particular, do you take anything from that game?
It's hard to criticize Georgia when they win the game. And Cincinnati was a top 10 team, right? Although I would have to, if I would have put myself in their shoes, I think I would be kind of disappointed. And not mainly just because it was Cincinnati and it was a group of 5 team and they barely beat them. And like you said, it was kind of lucky that they did beat them. It's just the way the entire season played out. Quite honestly, they botched the quarterback situation from the beginning. This isn't the first sort of misstep by Kirby Smart with personnel decisions. His best quarterback that he's ever coached is playing for a national championship next week for the Buckeyes. He let him get out of the door. So, I mean, I understand Kirby Smart's a first-time head coach, but now, the honeymoon is over with him, right? What year is he going into? His 5th year this coming season? Honeymoon's over. 5th year. You've been right there. You've knocked on the door. It's time to start making the right decisions instead of the wrong ones. It seems like every year, whether it's an in-game situation or a personnel situation. So I don't know if I take anything away from that one game in particular. I think it was more of a disappointing season. Georgia was probably good enough, talented enough to be one of the top 4 teams had they played the correct personnel from the beginning of the season.
6th year next year for
year.
Kirby. Yeah. 8-5 the first year after Rick left, and then he's had him on a good place, roughly top 5 since then.
Right.
Oklahoma, you brought up Oklahoma, and obviously they've been a disappointment once they've gotten into the playoff. This year's team played a lot better defense. It was a shortened season. We didn't see them play outside the conference, aside from playing, Dan Mullen would like us to say, a JV squad, basically, with Florida, because he certainly, that's a whole other deal. He should keep his mouth shut, in my opinion, about what type of team he fielded on that night. But it would have been interesting, and we say this after every playoff, to pick a few other teams that missed it to say, I wonder how they would have done. Like, how would have Oklahoma done? Is this defensive improvement real? Would it be real against some of the teams we're talking about?
Yeah. I think Oklahoma was, by the time the season ended, I think they were one of the 4 best teams in the country. If that's your only metric, then fine, put them in. Wins and losses still have to matter. Otherwise, why play the games? Them starting the season 1-2 really, really screwed them. But yeah, I think that it'd have been interesting to see Oklahoma against Alabama, right? Instead of Notre Dame against Alabama. In hindsight, of course, hindsight's 2020, but would have been an interesting matchup.
What do you think of Florida's performance against Oklahoma on a big stage, missing all those players, but then Dan Mullen comes out after the game and excuses it away?
I think Dan Mullen's an embarrassment to the University of Florida, and he owes his players an apology. The state, and that's not even the worst thing that he said, Mark. The worst thing he said was the last game we played was 11 days ago. In other words, no, you just played a game. That was the last game. And for you to pretend to not do your players a solid and give them the respect that they deserve for going out there and putting their body on the line for you and acting like the game didn't matter and didn't happen was embarrassing.
I'm right there with you. Had similar comments to say. The best I could do was, bottom line, just to tell Dan Mullen, just shut up. You're a professional. You've got a team that is highly regarded. Yes, we know who's supposed to be in the lineup, so we know who opted out. Mac Brown didn't do what you did. and he was losing his 5 best players other than his quarterback. He didn't do that. They went out there and competed. So it's your job to. And then I think at least the reasonable fans, the reasonable media are going to be able to evaluate, okay, Florida went out and they lost by 2 touchdowns to Oklahoma. It was a decent game, but and then they were missing all these players. So they went out there and gave it a good effort. Let's put this loss into context. That wasn't Florida fully loaded and staffed and ready to go with Kyle Pitts and the rest of their wide receivers and everybody else that they would have typically had, and people would have cut them a break. But you got to prepare your team. You're playing in a major bowl game on national television in front of a huge audience. That was an embarrassment.
I don't like when any coach makes excuses for losses. Just don't like it. And this isn't the first time he's done it. He did it earlier in the year. Remember when Texas A&M reportedly had too many fans? They had what, 20,000 people there, and you actually like they had some kind of noise advantage. That's embarrassing. I mean, look, Dan Mullen's a great X's and O's guy. I mean, that's the reason he has the job. But the guy, as far as his personality, he's not very likable. I know a lot of people say the same thing about Dabo Swinney, but I can guarantee you, anybody that works with and or plays for or ever has with Dabo Swinney, love the guy. All right? You can't say the same thing about Dan Mullen. You just can't.
I get where Dabo rubs people the wrong way, and I still don't understand where Ohio State or college football fans are so annoyed with this number 11 ranking. He's explained it. It makes sense. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't disagree with it. As long as he was consistent with that standard, I have no issue with that. I didn't rank Ohio State 3rd or 4th in the country when they came out at 3-0 like everybody else did, or most people did. I had them ranked like 16th. People went nuts. So I get his standard, and he was consistent. And he clearly said, I don't think they're the 11th best team in the country. He said that before the game.
You don't listen to what he says, Mark. Neither does Larry James here. He says, Dabo is a great salesman that knows nothing about football. He's a fraud. This is the kind of stuff I deal with, Mark. Dabo Swinney knows nothing about football. But Larry here does.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you, Larry, for the comment.
Wilkie, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate that. Wilkie and Pigskin here going back and forth. Thanks for your help, Pete. Big 12 perfect in bowls. Pete are still going to do a join.
I think he's talking about the subscription to the YouTube channel, the join thing where they join. Yeah. I'm still probably going to do that. I need to get on that actually. Thank you. Wilkie says, thank you for the help. He had a question for me. Big 12 perfect in bowls. That is correct, sir. How about it? Mark doesn't look too impressed by it.
Again, I got to look at each game, kind of weigh it. Texas, Colorado. Nice job, Carl Durrell. It's a top 50 team in the country. Should Texas be winning that game? Yeah, they completely annihilated Colorado. Okay, great. Texas is ranked in the top 20, even a down Texas team. Top 20 team. Colorado's like a top 50 team. And we could go on and on and on through the Oklahoma State game was fairly impressive. They beat a good Miami team. Again, top 20-ish Miami team. So there I can parallel those two programs and those two teams and say, good win for the Big 12. It's not like they crushed Miami. It was down to the wire. And I would have loved to have seen Florida show up with their full team and play Oklahoma. Of course, we know that there's not a 5-touchdown difference between those two teams, but we don't get that in all the bowl games now. But the Big 12 showed up and they won the games. They don't need to apologize for that. Absolutely. I think I always screw this name up.
Alakazam?
Yep. We'll go with that. Love the show. Is Dabo that powerful to say something and then everyone keeps talking about it? He said what he said. It was his opinion.
Yeah, there's different trains of thoughts on this. First of all, is he that powerful? Apparently he is. because this is what happens when you win a lot, though, Mark. He's a polarizing figure. Some people love the way that he is. Some people hate it. Of course, most people in the Clemson world, fan wise, university wise, love Dabo Swinney for a lot of different reasons. Bottom line is the guy speaks what's on his mind, and then some people like that about him. I happen to be one of those people. But this whole thing about with him ranking Ohio State number 11 in the coaches poll has been blown way out of proportion, in my opinion. Maybe that did help motivate Ryan Day. Maybe they did take it disrespectfully. Whatever, that's fine. But Dabo Swinney's coaches polling is completely meaningless. Completely meaningless. They act as if it has some weight in where Ohio State gets ranked when it doesn't. I don't even know why we still do a coaches poll, Mark. I really don't, because it's the most biased. I mean, all polls are biased, quite honestly. But there's nothing more biased than a coaches poll. Nothing.
Yeah, the coaches, I think I'm pretty accurate at saying this. I was in the mainstream media for about 9 years and was covering very closely Alabama, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State for about 7, and had conversations with the sports information directors all the time. And we all know this. You don't have to be that close to the situation to know the coaches basically will hand the top 25 to some type of sports information person in the sports information office and say, fill it out. I don't care. Or they'll give specific instructions like, I want them there, and then I care about these 3. Then the rest of them just do whatever you want.
Right. Yeah, Dabo does his own poll.
Does he do them all? Okay.
Yeah, he said so. I mean, again, with that, whether you agree with it or not, and I disagreed with it, by the way, because I had Ohio State number 4, I think 3 or 4 in my final ranking. So I clearly disagree with Dabo, but Dabo's entitled to his own opinion. He just felt like if you hadn't played 9 games, he's not putting you in the top 10 when you have other teams that played 9 and 10 games. So that was his philosophy. He stuck to it. Pissed some people off, but whatever. It's a meaningless. It's meaningless.
Yeah, it is. And I'm just looking for consistency out of anybody that ranks teams, and he was consistent. But it is meaningless. There's only one poll that matters, and that's not even a poll. It's just the committee coming up with their rankings. All right. Yeah, Oklahoma, Georgia. I would have loved to have had some kind of mini tournament between, as it turned out, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Cincinnati, Oklahoma. Love to have seen those teams get together.
Yeah, me too. That would have been a hell of a showing.
I think we've got some other super chats coming in. Appreciate that. We've got Ryan. Let's get some more Buckeye shows with Claire Crawford this year. Okay, we'll work on that. Hey, Claire knows she's welcome here anytime. Claire's been on many times, but Claire's too busy for us. So Claire is doing other things right now, but Claire knows she's always welcome, Ryan. Thank you so much for the super chat, though. Appreciate that, Ryan. And we also have I Can Sell You. Love the show, Mark and Pete. Go Bucks.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yes, we do. It's been a fun string of shows here. We'll carry you through the off season, of course, with no games to be played. We're going to have to come up with some interesting topics and so forth. But man, I got to say, as soon as I say that, Pete, with the transfer portal being what it is, and with seniors having to decide whether they want to go to the NFL draft, or maybe it's a situation where that particular player doesn't have an opportunity or isn't really an NFL draft prospect, but they're like, I'm done playing football. I'm going to move on to a career. The personnel moves and news are going to be like day to day throughout this off season. It's just going to be ongoing.
Yeah. Well, the transfer portal alone, there's like 500 players in the transfer portal. That's an unbelievable number of kids. But yeah, it's going to be wild. It's going to be a daily, like you said, it's going to be a daily thing pretty much. Which is good for guys like us, I guess. Have something to talk about.
Absolutely. I counted 87 quarterbacks.
87 quarterbacks.
And I would say 20 of them have played at a major school and been decent, started games. So
Yeah.
Guys leaving, like Hendon Hooker. He was the starting quarterback the last 2 years at Virginia Tech. Did okay, did all right. Like, I don't know why he's in the transfer portal. Like, I can understand it when somebody's run up against some guy who's not budging out of their starting position and they want to go play. But
The same thing with Jake Bentley. He just transferred to Utah this last season. Now he's already transferring out. Why? I mean, what? There had to have been obviously something else going on there. I mean, he can't really be just that scared to compete for the starting job at Utah, can he?
they just got Charlie Brewer from Baylor.
Yeah.
I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but yeah.
Well, I guess. Do you really want a guy on your team that's not even willing to compete for the job? I mean, I wouldn't, but I guess there are schools out there that need somebody so bad they'll take them. You know how it goes.
We're getting to a point where these teams are so stacked with good quarterbacks or capable quarterbacks that it's not like I think that they're just so well prepared coming out of high school that everybody's got a couple guys that are good. And yeah, you got to be prepared to go compete unless you're the capability of Jake Bentley and you want to go play in the Sun Belt Conference. If that's what you want to do and know that you're going to be a starting quarterback at Georgia State, then go right ahead.
That's the Chase Bryce route. So Chase Bryce transferred to Duke, but he started the whole season. Duke was awful, and then of course he transferred out to Appalachian State. But
yeah,
I don't think that was him losing the starting job. I think that was just a case of Duke is terrible. And he's like, I'm not going to spend another year in this terrible team. I'd rather go win something.
And I don't exactly know what the depth chart looks like at Appalachian State at quarterback. The kid that was there had started for 3 or 4 years. Zach, not coming up with his name. So he's going to have a decision to make to whether to come back or play another year. But if he's moving on, then, or if he's not moving on, regardless, Chase Bryce may be running into a better quarterback situation at Appalachian State than at Duke.
I think he is. And I think, and obviously they're a team that can compete in their conference. Duke is not. So,
no, Duke had it going there under David Cutcliffe for a few years where they were respectable. They went to a conference championship game in 2013 and went to a number of bowl games. And now here in the last few years, they've really taken the turn.
Well, David Cutcliffe has always been one of my favorite coaches. He's certainly a great coach. A great coach at a school that's not really dedicated to football the same way that a lot of other schools are. Doesn't have the resources a lot of other schools have, but he gets the most out of the least. But this year was, even by Duke standards, was embarrassingly bad. And I don't really know, based on the recruiting rankings they had last year and this year, I don't know if they're going to look much better next season. We'll see who they get at quarterback in there.
Appreciate everybody who's joined us here in the live chat and also super chat contributions coming in. Appreciate that so much. Got another one that just posted from Valdez. Valdez, appreciate that. Justin Fields is a fraud. Ohio State is a fraud. It's the old Dolphins versus Patriots trick. Miami always had a unique play sheet waiting for their superior and familiar foe. I don't think those Dolphins teams were losing 0 or 1 game every year.
Oh my God! Thank you. What's his name? Valdez. Thank you for the laugh, buddy.
Valdez joins us a lot, so I recognize Valdez and I appreciate him jumping in here. This is the first time that he's said something or made a comment that it's got me going a little bit. That's good.
It's a good one. By the way, seriously though, what is the health status for Justin Fields? I just saw somebody ask that in the chat a few minutes ago, and I meant to ask you. I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know that we're going to know.
Yeah.
They're going to keep that under wraps.
Yeah. Right. I guess we won't know until he goes out there and throws his first pass or whatever the case may be. See if he's looks 100% or not.
I got to say, when he first took that shot, I was thinking, oh my, okay, they're up by, I don't know what the score was at the time. I think it was 35-14.
Yeah, they were up by 21.
Yeah. And I thought, oh my, are they going to have to try to nurse home a win, like giving the ball to Trey Sermon like 48 times? What's going to happen here? My good, because it did not look good.
No, it didn't look good. Didn't look good. That was actually the moment I pretty much knew the game was over, just because I could just tell that night Ohio State was just a better team. I actually went on Twitter as soon as Skalski got ejected for targeting, and I said it's the game's over. Of course, a bunch of Clemson fans did not like me saying that when there's still a half of football to play. But I'm like, look, have you seen the team without James Skalski this year? We probably didn't even have a chance to win this game with him in there. With him out, we have zero chance. So, but yeah, that was a rough hit he took to the rib cage there. I hope he's okay for the game. Certainly was not intentional for all the people that are saying that too. James Skalski is not a dirty player. Okay, he plays hard. You can agree or disagree with the targeting rule. I agree that he should have been ejected by the letter of the law, by the rule. I don't like the rule though. But
AW disagrees with you, and so does old Toby too.
Okay. They can disagree. Did you see him hugging Justin Fields after the game? Would a dirty player do that? I don't think so. He felt bad for hurting Justin Fields. Dirty players don't feel bad for injuring somebody.
It is football. It's a collision sport. And what these defensive players are asked to do now in trying to keep their helmet, crown of the helmet, all of that out of the way. I saw some, I won't go into it because I'm missing the specifics. Just, a dozen times during the bowl season did I see plays where there was an unnecessary roughness where I was like, are you kidding me? My goodness. Like a quarterback was in a slide. And this defensive player, all he knows is that this quarterback's like 10 feet away from me, and he's still running. And so I'm going for a hit, and then all of a sudden, I saw players like sliding in front of the quarterback and running into him with their hands up and getting called for unnecessary roughness. And I'm like, seriously?
Yeah. I'm all for the health and safety of the players. Obviously, that's the most important thing. But there's got to be another way to address this targeting situation. And I'm not even talking about Clemson. I'm talking about for every team. There's got to be a better way to do it.
Absolutely. I agree as well. They made one decent step last year or this season in at least allowing the player to stay on the sideline with his team and not making him run to the.
That was a ridiculous thing too.
Yeah. So they at least took one decent step. We've talked about this in the past. I don't agree with the penalty being as egregious as it is. Give him one 15-yard personal foul, and then maybe the second one you kick him out. Number one. Number two, depending on when it happens during the game, it's not the same penalty.
And they say you can't judge intent, but they do it in other sports. They do it in basketball with flagrant fouls as opposed to a regular foul. They do it in soccer with the red card and yellow card, and they have a whole system there. There's no reason that football can't adopt something similar to those two sports.
I agree with that. It's difficult to do, but you can do it. So get some football minds, 10 or 15 in a room, and just let them watch football for an entire off season for months. Look at play after play after play after play and determine, okay, what are we looking for when we're looking for intent? And a lot of the time it's the last second adjustment of an offensive player and the way they're moving that you can say, okay, that guy was not intending to hurt him, to spear him, to target him. But then there are other times where, you can see it from 5 yards away. The guy's dropping his head. He's coming after him. There should be some kind of criteria where they could determine that.
And the same goes, I'm seeing people are pretending like I somehow now don't like the targeting rule because Skalski got ejected. I have never liked the targeting rule. I have 3 years of video evidence on YouTube to support that. I don't think that Wade should have been ejected last year for the hit that he made on the Clemson player. I don't like it. Never did.
Got a nice crowd here with 548 on the line. Chuck C., thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. The Ohio State offensive line is coming together, and they have the talent to hold off Bama enough to do some scoring. Maybe the two best O-lines in the championship. Could be. I don't think you're going to get an argument out of me. I don't know for sure that they're the two very best offensive lines, but they certainly could be. They look like it.
Yeah. Again, like I said earlier in the show, if Ohio State is able to dominate the line of scrimmage like the way they did against Clemson, then that gives them a chance. Yeah, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, though, Mark. Now, Mac Jones is not quite the runner that Trevor Lawrence is. Trevor Lawrence actually has some wheels that he can get out of trouble. He didn't really have much of a chance to do that on Friday night, though, because they were all over him. He had no time. But I think this is going to be a high scoring game. You're talking about Chris Olave and Smith for the Buckeye for the Tide, that two of the best, maybe the two best receivers currently in college football. A couple of Heisman caliber quarterbacks. So it'll be a fun game to watch for sure.
All right. We've had a great time with everyone here. Appreciate everybody jumping on the line with us. For those of you, and there's many who have just caught the last 5, 10, 15 minutes, wait for the video to post, which it will here in the next 15 to 20 minutes, and catch the show portion that you missed here on College Football Coast to Coast. We're here every week with Pigskin Pete, noon every Monday. And so with all these folks online, just keep it in mind that we'll be back here next Monday having a good time talking college football with you. Pigskin, let people know what you got going.
With this Wednesday night at 10 p.m., I'll be on my channel for the live call-in show. And then, of course, we'll be back here next Monday. But next Monday night, during the national championship game, I will be doing a live stream partnering up with Uncle Lou. I don't know whether we're going to do it on his channel or my channel. I'll make an announcement about that, but we will be doing the live stream for the national championship game. So I'm looking forward to that too.
Nice. I will certainly let you guys handle that. I will be on after the game at some point to take calls from all of you. We had a nice turnout last Friday night after Ohio State and Clemson. All right, everyone. Another edition of College Football Coast to Coast is in the books. We appreciate everyone's contribution. Smash that like button on your way out, and we will see you next Monday. And keep it locked in here. We've got more shows coming up later tonight.